What if you could lead more effectively and go home on time? Welcome to the Lightbulb. I'm Zoe Thompson, leadership and performance coach, and each week I bring you 3 practical insights from my work helping impact-driven leaders transform from reactive to intentional leadership so they can finish work on time and take guilt-free time off, creating success that feels as good as it looks. Let's jump in. Hello and welcome, episode 6. I have mostly been delivering workshops this week, so my light bulbs are slightly different, although still shaped between the workshops and the client work this week. And if you want to find out a little bit more about some of the topics that I'm talking about, pop me a message. I've got some resources I can share with you if you're interested. So looking at the 3 light bulbs this week, the first one that really came up for me is the uncomfortable middle bit. When we're transforming, when we're transitioning as part of that change, there is an uncomfortable bit where we're not in the old way of doing things and we're not fully into the new way of doing things. And we're kind of 1 foot in the old way, 1 foot in the new way. We're leaning into a new way of doing things. We're still more familiar with the old way. This actually came up in a client session this week. The client's been implementing all the changes we've been working on, taking some really good steps forward into making changes and how they approach things, which is also being cascaded into the way of working across their team. And the changes are working really well. It is making a difference. It's exactly what they wanted, but they hate it. They hate the fact that they aren't hands-on as much, that they are in the office working on the strategic stuff that little bit more. That's the challenge. They know that's where they need to be to do the job that they want to do. But at the moment, because it's new and because it's unfamiliar, it's just not enjoyable for them. And I hear this a lot, and this may resonate with you too. And eventually we get comfortable with it. As you know, the more we step outside of our comfort zone, the more we step into that fear zone, the more familiar that gets, then it becomes less of a fear and more of a comfort. And that's where this client is right now. So there's 3 phases of the transformation, especially the 3 phases that I notice in particular with the clients that I'm working with, and for myself too. The first is recognition. When we start to notice when we're slipping back into old behaviors and old habits, and when we're recognizing the opportunities to step into the new habits and behaviors, that's always the first stage. And that can be uncomfortable and frustrating in itself, because we recognize that we want to make those changes, but we still fall back into those old patterns of behavior. Phase 2, the transition phase, this is the hardest. This is where most people quit, but they might not see it as quitting. They just see it as just reverting back to those old habits. And eventually, when we keep pushing forward through that fear zone, through where it's uncomfortable, through where it's unfamiliar, we get into the learning and the growth zone. And that's where we also start to create a new normal. We find ways to make it work for us. We find ways that give us the outcome that we're looking for, but also the way that we want to be able to do it so that it is enjoyable and it is what we want. So not only are we getting the outcome that we're looking for, we're also getting more comfortable, more familiar, and a lot happier with the habits and behaviors that are associated with it. So doing the right thing sometimes feels wrong, even when it is completely right and it's completely on path, and we just have to trust the process. So there's an identity gap here of being that hands-on person. There's an identity fight going on of that's not what you do, that's not who you are. And it's not who you've been, but it is who you are choosing to be. And so that discomfort isn't a sign you're doing it wrong. It is just that evidence that things are changing. And it's not that it's wrong, it's uncomfortable, but we know that discomfort does not automatically mean that it's a negative. So we need to stick with it. We need to keep repeating the habits of behaviors that are taking us where we want to go. We need to keep imagining ourselves as this new identity and stepping forward. And eventually that discomfort becomes more comfortable and we get into that integration phase. If you've made changes and you know you need to make them, but right now you hate it too, and you hate how it feels, and it's not enjoyable for you, it's not failing. It's not that you've made the wrong decision. If it's in line with what it is that you want, and it's the outcome that you want, and the identity that you want of the leader who you want to be, then this is simply the discomfort of that middle of the transformation, that transition period. And it's necessary. But you need to recognize what's on the other side of this discomfort, and that's going to help to push you through. So that was my first light bulb this week, a really, really interesting conversation and session with my client. So light bulb number 2, when we do not create a boundary around our empathy, we will burn out. That is the light bulb. Turn it on bright. That is the light bulb. If we do not boundary our empathy, our sympathy, our kindness, we will burn out. We do not have the energy to continue in this way. It is not sustainable if we do not boundary it. Now, for a lot of us, and especially if you're listening into this podcast, you are probably somebody who identifies as a human-centered leader. You like to put your people front and center. You like to value your people. You like your people to feel valued. And so what that means is that often you do lead with empathy. You do lead with kindness. You do have values that mean you want to make a difference, that you want to be helpful. You want to be approachable, but they do need to be boundaried. So in the workshop on Thursday, we talked about the balance between I'm okay and you're okay, and making sure that we create a boundary around the kindness, around the empathy, so that we are okay and the people that we are leading are okay. We want to make sure that we do still continue to be human-centered in our leadership, but without the burnout. So there's an energy mismatch when we're continuing to give and we're giving more than we've got. There's an energy mismatch. When our values aren't aligned, when our needs are not met, there is another mismatch. And these mismatches are what lead to burnout. If you were in the workshop on Thursday, you would have heard me say, people pleasing is kindness without a boundary. We are so focused on making sure that the other person is okay through our kindness that we are being unkind to ourselves in the process. It is out of balance. So we want to make sure that we are following through with those good intentions, that we are making sure that our behaviors match those intentions, and that we boundary them to protect them and what is important. Now, the other part of the workshop on Thursday was talking about self-determination theory and meeting our team's needs. If you've not heard of it before, self-determination theory is the concept that all individuals need autonomy, competence, and relatedness. We need to make sure as leaders that we are not undermining our team's need for autonomy, their need for competence, and their need for relatedness by overstepping into them being able to make decisions for themselves, for them to be able to take action for themselves, and for them to be able to work together as a team and recognize and notice where they are able to contribute and where their contributions are significant. Self-determination theory is important, and certainly the light bulb for me in the workshop, and I know it was one of the light bulbs for one of the attendees, is that actually looking at this and recognizing that actually when we lead in a certain way, we can really undermine what's very much needed by the individuals in our team. It helped them to reframe that and look at it differently. You can continue to pride yourself on being empathetic. You can continue to pride yourself on putting people first. Absolutely. That's probably one of your key strengths as a leader. What we want to make sure is that this is in balance and that this is boundaried. And that will help you to continue being a good leader in balance for a sustainable period of time. We don't want to people please, because not only will that lead to burnout for you, it is not going to help your teams in the way that you think it will. They need the autonomy, they need the competence, and they need the relatedness. And that's really important. When we're thinking about I'm okay, you're okay, and we're leading in balance and we're leading with boundaries, we can ensure that that happens. Okay, third and final light bulb from this week, the trust denominator. So why self-orientation destroys everything else that you've built. This was part of a workshop this week where we were talking about intentional connection at work. Now, for a lot of you, you will probably have really good relationships with the people that you work with. Again, something that you probably pride yourself on in terms of your leadership. What we were talking about in the workshop this week was intentional connection, being very intentional with how we connect with people in work, and understanding that as leaders, we want strong credibility, strong reliability, and we want strong relationships. Now, as part of that, we want high trust. Now, often the problem is this self-orientation. So when we look at the trust equation, it's credibility plus reliability plus intimacy divided by our self-orientation. We want to make sure that we're credible, we're reliable, and that we create a safe space for people to feel that they can trust us. Now, when we make this about them, that helps us to put the focus on them rather than the focus on ourselves. If you want to increase your trust, then looking at that trust equation can really help you. What you want to avoid is making everything about your agenda, your reputation, and ego comes into play here, your need to be right. We want to make sure that when we're having these conversations with individuals on our teams, that we aren't making it all about us and what it is that we want and what's important to us and our priorities, that we put that focus in on to them so that they feel the focus is with them. That's going to help to build the trust. Recognize where you are coming in with that high self-orientation within your own leadership and create that shift from what do I need to what does the situation require and what does this person need. Leaders who build trust the fastest have low self-orientation. They'll put the people first, the needs of the people first, the needs of the situation first, and then themselves. You're probably very credible, probably very reliable too. You've been able to build those good relationships. We want to help you to be able to increase that trust is by looking at that trust equation to see where you can make some changes to help increase that trust and be more intentional with the connections that you have in the workplace. So those are my 3 light bulbs from this week. I'm not going to lie, it's been a very long week. There's been 5 workshops this week alongside my client work. It's been a great week, lots of great coaching sessions and really good workshops too. So a good week, a long week. There's definitely been a lot of light bulbs this week, and it's quite hard to pick out the 3 for this week, but I hope they've been helpful to you. As always, if you've got questions, feel free to reach out and let me know. Some of the workshops this week have been recorded and are available as resources. So if you want to find out more about that, get in touch and let me know. And those are your 3 takeaways for this week. Before you go, ask yourself, what's my light bulb moment from this? And now that I know what I know, what will I do differently? Choose one action, however small, and commit to it. That's how overwhelmed and reactive becomes aligned and intentional. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you next week on the next episode of The Lightbulb.